This is the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. It's Tuesday, March 26, 2024 at 5:02 p.m. And the first order of business is a call to order by roll call. Linda Escobedo,
Present.
Mike Lawson,
Present.
Rich Feely,
Present.
Harry LaFleur, not on the call yet, and Keith Bergman present. So we do have a quorum. We have 4 out of 5 present. And so next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. And we did have a set from March 11th that I had previously distributed. And I wonder if there's a motion to approve.
There is, so moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Linda. Is there discussion? All right, so on the motion to approve, a roll call vote. Linda,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
and Keith, aye, so that passes 4-0. Next item is Novo Riverside Commons LLC application for trust funds for sewer improvement fee for 51 affordable units at 292, 294 Baker Avenue, 40B, $392,285. Oops, apologize for the long agenda topic. But you'll recall that at our last meeting on March 11th, we scheduled tonight's meeting at 5 o'clock to be able to act on a funding application from Novo, which we invited at our March 11th meeting. And we wanted to be able to act prior to the close of the ZBA's public hearing on Novo, which was to have occurred tonight at 7 at the ZBA. I understand ZBA and Novo have since agreed to extend the deadline for closing Novo's public hearing to April 11th or 12th. So that there's some additional time that they've built in, but we're happy to have everyone here tonight. We did get Novo's application. It arrived just before 2 o'clock today. I hope you all had a chance to look at it. If not, we can certainly take the time to go through it and discuss how we'd like to proceed. I did have a chance to review it. I'll just say it's one of the best written grant applications I've ever read. So thank you, for the time put into that. And what I found, no surprises and lots of confirmation of things that we've been discussing. So appreciate that as well. And I know the time has been taken up in the last couple of weeks on negotiating the form of a grant agreement, a proposed grant agreement between the trust and Novo, and I want to thank Town Council for that effort. And I'm aware, and I guess I'd ask for an update in general that since many of the issues the trust had raised, which we'd hope could be addressed, the form of the grant agreement makes note of that there'll be a ZBA decision, and it's our understanding that all of the issues that we've raised will show up in some form in that ZBA decision. So before we go much further, I'm going to welcome Carrie. And so I'll complete the roll call. Carrie LaFleur, present. All right, thanks, Carrie, for joining us. And we were just introducing folks, and what I want to do here is just to sort of provide an update of where we are. At our last meeting, we had done a couple of things. First, we revised our housing production plan priority list of projects to add this one in the name of Novo. So that's in our list, and we also invited them to submit a grant application, which we received today. This is the cover sheet, which just arrived, and we're thankful for that. And just to highlight some of the issues that we put on the table. Well, first, the request is for $392,285 for the sewer improvement fee for the 51 affordable units in Novo's project, and that's calculated on 89 bedrooms. And as we know, its site is specifically listed in the housing production plan and strategy number 3. And some of the issues that we had discussed with Novo and put on the table for resolution in now, I guess, in the ZBA's decision are things like Novo's voluntary compliance with the fossil fuel-free bylaw, as it will be amended at April's town meeting. That's really so that we'll all have bragging rights about it. It's a great project and one that on its face fully complies, and we're happy to have compliance. Traffic improvements we talked about last time, public access and alignment of the Assabet River Bridge that will be constructed through Novo's property out to Baker Ave, parking and consideration for overflow parking for Novo tenants, and no artificial turf. Those were some of the things we put on the table, just for in terms of how we would fund the grant amount. We only have $378,000 and change left in our community preservation fund article of a year ago. We had over 1.1 million, and this will have committed all of those funds. So the residual amount that we need, 14,000 and change, would come from non-CPA funds. It's basically Articles 28 and 29 of last year's annual town meeting that are funding this. So this is sort of a snapshot of where we are, and I invite town council to just sort of tell us what is and maybe the chair of the ZBA as well. Theo is here with us, and welcome. Just what how things are going with the ZBA decision and the other issues that we've identified. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, so I can start off, and Theo, please fill in if I'm missing something. And just echoing appreciation for Stephanie and her team at Novo for quick turnaround on the grant agreement. So the way the grant agreement is structured for your purposes, as Keith pointed out, those issues that we talked about before, you won't see in the grant agreement because they are envisioned to be in the comprehensive permit, and that's where they really ought to be as an enforceable matter. But the grant agreement is structured so that it is tied to presumes that a comprehensive permit will be granted. If there is no permit granted, I don't foresee that, but if there is no granted, then there'll be no reason for the money to go towards the waiver. So it sort of follows in that way. So it's conditional and would expire if not granted. So that's sort of the easy part. That's the legal mechanism for the grant agreement. And since the money is going to the town, it would be a transfer from the trust to the town at the appropriate time when Novo alerts the trust that it's time to make that payment. Essentially, instead of Novo paying directly to the sewer improvement fees, the trust would make that transfer, provide evidence that it did so, and then that would square that away. With respect to the comprehensive permit, Elizabeth Hughes on the planning staff and my colleague and I and Theo have been working on the draft decision incorporating all these conditions, including the ones raised by the trust, other ones raised during the process. That draft has not yet been shared with the applicant, which is customary to sort of make sure that it aligns with what happened or what came up during the proceeding. So we're still at that point, but the idea is to have that start getting workshop between those two entities and between the full board, because the rest of Theo's board has not seen that yet either. And my understanding, Theo, you can speak to the agenda tonight, is that conversation will begin tonight, but that a little bit of extra time will help with that, with waivers and that are requested, et cetera. So everything is moving kind of right along for where this group's purposes come in, and this helps take care of at least one of the issues that would have come up otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Mina. Yeah, we actually the draft decision got emailed out early this afternoon to the board members, so they have had some time to peruse it before the meeting tonight. But tonight's meeting will only go through the waivers, and I think I might bring up one or two small items that we can just chat about, and that then can be incorporated in the decision. But there won't be much discussion tonight about the conditions. And for all intents and purposes, I mean, we've all seen the conditions come through the end. They came from our various peer review consultants. We've mentioned something. We mentioned a few during our hearings. So it's the conditions all are what everybody's expecting they're going to be. So what you just showed Keith here, they will all be in our conditions. It's items we talked about, so that's just incorporated. So and then also I think that's why we continued or asked for the extension through April 11th, because we're still having that interaction with the applicant, etc. And I think we've had a pretty good dialogue through this whole process with the applicant, so we need to keep that going until the bitter end. And it won't be that bitter, but it will April 11th, so you all know, will be the end. We will be voting then. There won't be any extension because we're one member of our board will be leaving. That will be her last meeting, and we're going to need a vote. So we will vote that night no matter what.
Very good. Thanks very much. I'll call on Stephanie next. And actually, there was, I think, a question that had been raised from our last meeting when John Smolak's letter had, I think, had identified something that you were requesting the trust to recommend to the ZBA. I think it was I'm not sure if is that a thing still, or would you?
So thank you for bringing that up. I did not include that within the grant application. Just it didn't quite fall neatly within the confines of what you were looking for, but that was just relative to asking whether the Housing Trust would support our request to have, I think it was a minimum of 36 spaces offsite to be allowed to be used for shared parking. So I think that's, again, just to kind of reiterate for everybody here, the project itself has 284 on-site parking spaces. And so that's a ratio of 1.4. And so what we are interested in is Taurus owns the abutting property. So it's easy enough to get the easements there just to allow for those occasions where you might have an additional surge of parking, or it might be easier to allow kind of off-site, sometimes graduation parties, more people come to properties or something like that. So and so it was just to request the trust to support that request that the applicant's making to the board.
Thank you. To the extent that either Theo or Mina can reply, is that something where is that in the category of message received on your part, or do you think it would need a vote, some support from us in order to make it into the decision?
So just from a legal standpoint, I don't think you need to provide an overall message of support for the project. Clearly, your vote does that. So that I think is a vote on the grant sufficient. With respect to particular issues and whether to support particular waivers, I think that's a judgment call for the trust. It's not necessarily within the normal bailiwick of the trust, but it's certainly not inappropriate either if it sort of is necessary for the project. The audience for that would be Theo and his board, rather than me. We just implement the decision, or help write it. That's it.
Right, thank you. Then I'll put Theo on the spot. Have we correctly framed what the issue is that's being talked about?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then
And-
I'll assume, Stephanie, you might bring that up tonight as well.
Yes.
That's something. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so if, all right, thank you. I'm gonna call on Rich Feely, who has his hand up.
Yeah, on the parking, that actually was in our original list, because we thought that it was better to have some additional open space, which was provided by the applicant, and use the office parking for overflow. So, I mean, I think we should definitely be in favor of that waiver. How we implement that, I don't know, but that idea sort of actually surfaced in our first correspondence about this. I had one question about the deal, maybe two. One of which is, it says we need to pay when the building permit is filed. We had discussed paying when Novo has to pay the town for the market rate units. Is that when the building permit is filed, or when they actually connect?
So my understanding, and perhaps I should have given the language a little bit more fluidity. My understanding is that the fee would be required when you're pulling building permits, but if it's not until the connection is actually being made, if that's sometime down the road for the sewer department, we just want to make certain that when they tell us the bill is paid, that we have an ability and we have an appropriate window to come back to the trust and say, can you issue the portion associated with the affordables? So,
I mean, I think we're all on board with that. I'm just cheap enough to think that at 5%, it would be nice to sit on it another 6 months if you don't have to pay it until then. But I'm totally in support of paying at the same time that Novo has to pay for the market rate units. So that's an adjustment I'd like.
Yeah, thanks for the question. In fact, from a draft that I saw this afternoon of which I can circulate to do we have a final version yet of the grant agreement as it's being negotiated? It's pretty close to.
Yeah, Keith, I don't want to put Stephanie on the spot, but I think the version I sent around this afternoon was, from what I understand from the back and forth, the final. The
Okay, and so I'll circulate that to our board members, but it does actually follow the line that Rich is suggesting, that we would pay the funds, or the funds would be transferred from the trust to the sewer enterprise fund at the point at which the balance of the fee for that project is paid, is owed. So it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be letting loose of the funds any sooner than Novo is letting loose of the other $1 million or so that's going to the sewer department.
Yeah, that's
Good.
currently.
Well, I think that resolves that question. The only other question I had was in the draft motion. I understand why we're not repeating the permit conditions and essentially, relying on the ZBA to, include the things that we want. Do we need some language that simply says that we're doing this in the expectation or on the assumption that the items listed in our previous correspondence will be included in the permit?
Um, Mina, you opened your mic, so if,
I was
please.
going to offer to address that from a legal perspective, Frank. So I think the expectation is in the draft that all of those items will be included, and that's certainly what the ZBA has. I don't think it would be appropriate for the ZBA chair or me to assume that there'll be, no change, or that we just can't tell, we can't know for sure, obviously, if a member disagrees with that, et cetera. So I think it's up to the trust. If it believes that it would like to revisit the issue, should any of those conditions not make it into the final permit, you would want to put that into your motion. My understanding is that these are all conditions that the applicant is agreeing to, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be including the only one that had any question about it was the parking one, because it is that trade-off of, you might have one way of solving the parking problem, others might have others. That's really the only one.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess then what I hear you saying is there's no problem with us simply saying, that this is, we're approving this now based on the expectation that the permit will include everything, and I would include in that list the waiver of the 36 parking spaces, provided that overflow parking is provided on the tourist property.
Other comments on that? I think I would take a different position. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
So I was just gonna say, I think I would appreciate it if the vote on the funding for the sewer improvement fee and the trade-off on the parking were two separate items. I'm not sure how I feel. Personally, I think the parking trade-off is fine, but I'm not sure how I feel about voting about that as a member of the trust. And I think I'm somewhat concerned in my day job of sending that signal to the ZBA that it should be, I don't want it to be perceived as something other than it is. So I'd appreciate it if we could have two separate votes so I can vote in support of the funding for the sewer improvement fee. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I was going to suggest that, and these words are made so much easier because we have the chair of the ZBA here with us, along with town council and the attorney for the applicant. And based on the representations that I'm hearing from all of them, the issues, by and large, the issues that we've raised are going to be, we have our understanding that they will be raised in the order of conditions that will be adopted by the Zoning Board of Appeals as they go through their efforts. And I would hate to any of the big ones, if the issue were that they weren't agreeing, that they refused to comply with the fossil fuel bylaw as opposed to voluntarily complying, that might be a deal breaker for me. What accommodations are made for parking isn't. And I would want to give it to where I think the the towering issues that are there, transportation, the fossil fuel, other are even no artificial turf have been addressed by the applicant and are going to be in the decision. So I would agree with Carrie that we ought to have two separate votes. I'll vote in favor of recommending the parking, recommending the parking issue, but it's not going to be tied, that recommendation is not going to be tied to the grant award.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my concern is that the applicant opened up some space based on the expectation that they wouldn't have to meet the full parking ratio. So, you know, the answer to that is the one they provided, which is overflow parking, you know, on the. So I do actually think that's important, because if you didn't waive the 36 spaces, then you'd lose some of the open space that's now in the design that everybody likes.
Also your 2 cents here. I think the ZBA will be voting on the 1.4 ratio. And you know, we've all through our process, we've been trying to push that number of parking spaces down. So I feel relatively comfortable that you know is going to happen. That being said, on having overflow parking on another lot, I don't think the ZBA can vote on, because that's not a lot that's before us. And you know, eventually it'll come when there is, you know, in the next round of permitting that's associated with this project. But we can't vote on having an X amount of spaces on somebody else's lot, because it's two separate entities, tightly connected, but it's two separate entities, and we can't vote on having the entity that's not before us accept parking spaces. So, but that's just a bit of a technicality, but we will be voting on you know, as few parking spaces, as we've always said during the whole process, as few parking spaces as possible. So.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, and all the more reason why, if we had two separate votes, and I would say one is a vote on funding for the Novo project, and the second one will be on the future application that will come before the ZBA dealing with parking. And we can take both votes now, tonight, to reassure Novo that, you know, we're not only are we comfortable giving them the money for this project, but we're also comfortable in supporting them and Taurus at some later event or application process that comes before the ZBA.
I have no problem with splitting the votes, Keith.
All right.
I think the only change in your proposed vote is the language that the money is payable when the sewer fee is payable for the market rate units.
Yes, yeah, the form of the vote does not refers to subject to approval as to form, subject to a grant agreement, authorize the chair to execute a grant agreement subject to approval as formed by town council. And I can say now today, town council approves of a grant agreement with that language in there. So by reference, we're getting that. We will get that with the proposed motion tonight.
Well, then I would move that motion.
That's a motion by Rich Feely. I'll read the motion. Is there a second?
There is. Second.
Second by Mike Lawson, and I will read the motion. It is moved that the trust vote pursuant to trust funding guidelines to approve Novo Riverside Commons LLC's application for $392,285 in trust CPA funds in the amount of $378,135.76, and non-CPA funds $14,149.24 for the sewer improvement fee for the 51 affordable units to be constructed at the 292, 294 Baker Avenue 40B pursuant to Housing Production Strategy number 3, and further to authorize the chair to execute a grant agreement set amount with NOBO, subject to approval as to form by town council. All right, so that's the motion. Is there further discussion on that motion?
Where's the clause on when it's payable, Keith?
It's in the grant, it's in the grant agreement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the grant, yeah, that you're authorizing me to execute a grant agreement that's approved as to form by town council. We have that grant agreement. I'll share it when I get a clean copy after the meeting. We'll circulate it. So you'll see what the form of the agreement is, and it does provide for the payment, the transfer of the trust funds to the sewer enterprise fund when NOBO notifies the town that it's making its payment for the balance of the sewer improvement fee.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, further discussion. All right, let's have a roll call vote on the motion. Linda,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Rich,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
and Keith, aye. So that passes 5-0. Thanks very much. Now we'll call for I'll call for a second motion, which would be to and I'll refer to it this way: vote to support item 8 in Attorney John Smolak's March 11th, 2024 letter to the trust for a waiver request to the zoning board of appeals to allow for the joint use of at least 35 surface parking spaces located on 310 Baker Avenue for both the NOBO tenants and 310 Baker Avenue commercial tenants. Motion by Rich,
Yep.
Second.
second by Mike. Is there discussion on that? And this will not go, this will, I guess I'm holding in abeyance until there's an application in front of the ZBA, at which point we'll send this letter. But we can certainly send a record of the vote in the meantime. Yes, Linda.
So I'm wondering, we have previously talked about supporting the local preference here. And, at the February meeting, we had some discussion about that as well as the other issue
And
that
that's in their grant, their application does specify that the applicant's in favor, is agreeing to the local preference.
and the other item we talked about had to do with the equitable assignment of parking spaces inside. And what became apparent, as you recall from that discussion, is that all parking spaces inside would be charged an amount for that parking space, and that amount would be the same for both the affordable housing tenants as well as the regular tenants. And we had some discussion about that in terms of whether that was equitable. So I'm wondering where that fits in this list of issues that we say we're supporting or not supporting.
Yeah, I guess that would be an issue that's currently in front of the ZBA, but I think we also, from our discussion, I know I reached the conclusion that that was not an issue that I was willing to have be a deal breaker.
Same here.
And I think we were looking for some guidance from Liz Rust on who was going to look into that as a matter of policy. But it was, and so I think that's where it was, and I don't know if that's an issue for the ZBA or not, Theo.
That was one of the few items I was going to bring up on tonight's meeting and see whether I can discuss it. Linda brought it up just at the very end of our last meeting, and we punted on that at that point in time. So I was going to bring it up tonight and see what and just see what the temperature is of my my other board members on that one.
All right, so we'll happy to be at your meeting at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then perhaps that's the place for us to raise it.
Yeah. And I guess I would hope that Liz would vis-a-vis staff would weigh in on this since this has come up as an issue, and she said she would look at it.
Yeah, and I guess if not tonight, then there's now a meeting on April 11th to if Liz is for some reason not planning on being at tonight's ZBA meeting. So whoever Liz works for should raise that issue.
Yeah, thank you. I just didn't want that to get lost.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for, it is one of
It
those.
was on my
troublesome
list tonight
issues.
too.
Yeah, it's a troublesome issue. I'm not sure what the answer is. I just know I don't want to hang my head on it. So hang my head on it, really. Okay, anything else on this topic? Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks to everyone who's been involved in this project. Thanks to please express our thanks to Novo for picking that site and that design. I love the redesign too, and we even have a copy of that in the plans that we were provided, and it's going to be a great project for this community. And I made inquiry earlier today. It's one of the issues that the trust had identified of things that we liked or wanted to support is the bridge across the Assabet River, which is which would be an extension of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And so I wanted to find out what the status of that project is. We're going for 100% design funding. We, being the town, going for 100% design funding for the bridge at town meeting this year. It's part of the community preservation article, which the finance committee has not yet brought itself to adopt a recommendation on. Hopefully they will do that on Thursday night. That's another meeting that trust really ought to cover, because our $500,000 for next year is also in that article. But that the 25% design plans for the bridge will be complete by June. The 100% plans would be what comes next. And I know that from Elizabeth Hughes that she's in touch with the Boston Region MPO about getting that project programmed in the 5-year transportation improvement plan that the Boston region administers. And I had raised that issue only because another extension of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury, the final leg that will connect Sudbury, that will connect it to the Framingham portion. The Boston Region MPO has already reached out to Sudbury inviting them to program their extension onto the MPO plan, even with just 25% design plan. So I hope that Concord will be as enthusiastic or vigorous in trying to get the $8 million bridge programmed as well, because it'll be much needed. And it was great to see the timeline in there in the application as well, that it's almost, in the category of before we know it. We'll see the Nova project rise. So that's all great news. And thanks everyone for the work done on this.
Yeah, so and I actually would like to thank the trust here to be flexible with the schedule and to flexible with the money, obviously, but also with the schedule, so that we can the CBA can incorporate all your comments and your decision into our decision and conditions. So that's very much appreciated that you scheduled your meetings just so that you could have optimal input into our deliberation. So thank you for that.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, one less waiver to have to deny. So very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any final comments on this topic before we move on to the next? All right. Thanks very much.
The staff.
Next
Thank
up-
you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks. It really appreciate it a lot. Next
Bye.
topic is funding for the trust, and just so that we all know, I'll go back to the to my screen, and our balance right now is we now have an uncommitted balance of 2,091,000. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line. $2,037,000 in our funds. That's all non-CPA funds. We've spent all the CPA funds that they've given us, and we'll be ready to get the next $500,000 from the CPA, assuming that town meeting approves Article 40. I wanted to mention as well, we've back in August, we got a vote of encouragement from the select board to apply for CPA funds and ARPA funding. And I know that from discussion I had with Carrie, I know that other things have come up with as priorities for ARPA perhaps. But I did want to check in and see about, Carrie, what the availability of there might be for the trust to apply for ARPA funds, or those need to be, or if there are other takers that have since been identified since the governor submitted her budget.
Yeah, so no decisions have been made on any additional ARPA funding allocations. And we are not currently accepting any new requests, although I unofficially hear from lots of people, including the trust, about the interest in the funding. So I don't really have anything to report yet, other than the trust still has not missed an opportunity to apply for ARPA funding.
Thanks. I wonder if, and I want to get to later on, I may drop the name ARPA again when we discuss MCI Concord later in the agenda, but thank you for that answer for now. Meanwhile, state legislation to fund the trust, there's some hopeful signs to report since our last meeting. The Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, has signaled his openness to a real estate transfer fee of the sort that's in the governor's bill. From what I've heard, he'd probably prefer that it not be a maximum of 2%, maybe 1%. He'd want some accommodations made, as I think we all would, for Western Massachusetts, which might involve lowering or allowing a community to have a limit, a threshold that's lower than the $1 million that Concord's been advocating, and that the governor's bill provides. But it's great. It's great news. I think I heard today the Housing and Livable Community Secretary was in Concord. Well, I know he was in there because Linda and I saw him with Megan and Stefan and Ed, who were also on this call. We were all hosted over at the Housing Authority and had a chance to talk with the secretary. And I believe I heard him say that this bill is going before the bonding committee next week. So if so, that'll, I didn't want to put that in writing because I didn't want Rich sending it off to all of his buddies on the Aloha Coalition. Maybe you've got more insider information than we do, but it's looks pretty hopeful there. Rich, any insight that you have on that?
Earlier this afternoon, the expectation was that the hearing at the bond committee would be early April. They didn't say next week, but there was also, there has been the general expectation that the bonding committee will probably not mess with the transfer fee language. They'll deal with the bonding numbers, and that any changes and removal or decisions to keep it in will occur at Ways and Means, and then, before it goes to the floor. So, there's an expectation the transfer fee survives to the next step.
Very good. Well, I'm feeling hopeful. And if not this year, I don't know when, but we're suddenly thinking of lots of things that the money might be used for, including not having to ask the town for any more money, which will, apart from, whatever minimum amount needs to go to in CPA funds for housing. But that would be a good problem to have to solve, of how to organize to plan for a real estate transfer fee. So good luck to all of us. Next, any other comments on that? Next item is to do a quick debrief on the pre-town meeting public hearings that have been held. We had interest in 4 articles: Article 32, the fossil fuel free bylaw amendments, Articles 34 and 35 from the planning board, and Article 40, the CPA funds. I was pleased to see that the select board has voted to recommend all 4 of those articles. So thanks to the select board. That Linda Miller's on the call. The planning board will be voting perhaps at its next meeting to support those 2 zoning. It's 2 zoning articles. Linda, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Hi.
Yes, good evening. I am not sure if it will be at one of the next 2 meetings. I'm not sure that it will be our next meeting. So it's probably going to be April 16th.
Okay, and is there are there amendments to will the motion be significantly different than the article?
Well, it can't be significantly different.
Well, but it'll be different. It'll be insignificantly. Yeah.
I don't know. There are a few little endpoints that, have come up. I don't see at this point that there'll be any changes as you say, of significance or really maybe even any changes, but there's some back and forth.
Okay, very good. And perhaps that's the situation as well for the fossil fuel free bylaw amendment. I think that I think there was some wording. I think I heard there was some wording about what the effective date of the amendment is, and it goes, and the language as it exists currently is probably needs to stay in place rather than what the article proposes, which is to have it take it effect 90 days after DOER approves it, which would be a date in the past. That would be December 22nd plus 90 days, which is too early. You can't have a bylaw that takes effect before the date of the town meeting vote. And I think we're still waiting. I did not check this afternoon. I usually check at least once a day, but last time I did check, the Attorney General had not yet approved the previous fossil fuel bylaw from the January 23 town meeting. So hopefully things can move along on that. The last one, Article 40, requested by the Community Preservation Committee. As I said earlier, the Finance Committee meets this Thursday as its, I guess, last opportunity to adopt recommendations before their report goes to the printer. I know so hopefully they will find it in their hearts to favorably recommend the article that contains our funding for next year. But I'm planning to go to that meeting just in case, and if others can as well, I think that would be appreciated. Any other debriefs on those town meeting public hearings as it affects our articles? Okay. Next is MCI Concord status of local advisory committee and state legislation. And I certainly welcome Perry to provide us with whatever new information you have. I know from watching the select board on the Zoom call last night that they reviewed a draft charge for the committee and that they've scheduled adoption of a charge for the board's next meeting, which is this coming Monday night. Is that April 1st? Is that correct?
It is, and Linda, I'm happy to defer to you if you'd like to speak, but I don't want to put you on the spot either.
Linda.
Fine. Yeah, for those of you who were there, we had a good discussion, first good discussion on how that charge would read. And I think we're hoping that we'll be able to come to agreement and finalize that at our next meeting.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I could also add for anybody who hasn't seen a copy of the draft that this is a new advisory board, 7 to 9 members that would be seated by the select board, basically in the initial phase to gather community input on the potential redevelopment of MCI Concord, to review best practices of other similar projects in communities within the Commonwealth, and then to follow the legislation. So basically, that's what this group would do in the first phase of its work.
Very good. Thanks, Carrie. And I've put up this slide here just with a for those who may be viewing at home, that and also noting that or showing the information from a prior meeting about the Rep. Cataldo's amendment to outside section 107, which directs DCAM to study existing conditions and conduct planning for the site's reuse and report back within 18 months of the act's passage. And that they'd be, DCAM commissioner would be consulting with many state groups and local groups, including the local advisory body, the CHD, and it says in there CHDC chair, MAPC rep, Concord Business Partnership, among others. Conducted at least 3 public hearings in Concord. And then to include a report about existing and ongoing municipal plans, including those that encourage development of a variety of housing options. And a comment that I wanted to offer on that, listening to the select board's discussion last night of what the first phase of their 2-phase advisory committee was doing, that I wasn't sure if that was aligned squarely with what we heard from Senator Mike Barrett, who told the League of Women Voters Forum that the town should send the signal to the state legislature as soon as possible, which I read to be while it was still in the legislature's hands, of what the town's vision is for the reuse of the property. So to prove a worthy partner with the state. And so I wasn't sure if this two-phase process, which is going to do the planning in phase 2. And only after the state passes the law, whether that was in alignment with what at least Senator Barrett was suggesting be done.
Well,
I don't
Keith,
know if there's any comment on.
Keith, I can add or offer that Mary Hartman, who took the first pass at drafting this charge, has been working very closely with Representative Cataldo. And I believe that the charge as drafted is in keeping with what he is recommending that the town be working on while the legislation is going through the approval process.
Okay, but not Senator Barrett, said it.
I would say working more closely with Representative Cataldo, but keeping in mind input and feedback that we're receiving from every member of our legislative delegation.
Thanks. Yeah, I was sitting next to Rep. Cataldo at the Housing Authority's event today, and did express to him the concern that I just shared with all of you. And so if it is a problem, I know that he'll, make sure that he's in touch to fix it. So perhaps that's certainly the best way to address it. I was just, as an observer, I was concerned that I was not hearing an alignment to what at least Senator Barrett had urged the town to do and what the select board seemed to be doing. But I'm happy if that can be worked out between the select board and the legislators. That's certainly where it needs to take place. So thank you.
I would just add that the select board did provide some very specific additions to Senator Cataldo's proposed changes for the governor's legislation, and one of them was to work closely with Concord's MCI Closure Advisory Committee. So I think there is some understanding, and that was included for what went forward, at least at this point, depending on what changes occur at the legislature.
Great, thanks very much, and it'll be, and now this is the point that I bring up, just out of curiosity, whether resources will be available to that MCI Concord Advisory Committee so that then they can succeed, or will it be an all volunteer effort like this committee is? If anyone has any answers.
Well, I think the board did not get into that to any great detail last night, but I do think one of the members mentioned money and looked in my direction, so.
Hopefully you nodded up and down as opposed to sideways, so. And which is what I was thinking about for ARPA, but for once in a generation opportunity, I think the town certainly wants to get it as right as it can.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, just from what we've all seen with whether it's housing production plan updates or the MBTA community zoning, really helps to have an outside facilitator walk you through things. But however you decide to do that will be very important to the town. Very good. Other comments or questions about MCI Concord? So I had a related topic that is the next one on the agenda, and that is, since the after reading the Cataldo amendment in the select board's packet for its previous meeting, and saw where it was directing the DCAM commissioner to read local reports and studies and so on to inform them, I thought, well, you know what? If someone's going to be looking at the housing production plan, maybe which was approved in January of 2023, maybe now's the time to make some necessary amendments to that plan. It's by the time state officials are looking at it to chart the future of MCI Concord. Because there have been because frankly, I think our world has changed since then. So I wanted to put up for like I'd sent a memo out about this and had discussed it with I discussed it with Liz Rust and with Lee Smith and others and briefed many folks about this, but the here it is, that now it might be timely to look at amending the housing production plan this year. And that if we look at the state's own regs, it says that a community can amend its plan at any time to reflect changes in local circumstances. And even a major change such as incorporation of new census data, but certainly if goals and strategies are revised. So it occurred to me that if we look at what changes in local circumstances have occurred in Concord since since the plan was approved by the state a year ago, January. There are a number of significant changes, starting with the census data that came out in May of 2023, because our housing production plan is still based on 2010 census data. It has not been updated to reflect the most recent census. So that to me is if there was nothing else that we had done, I think we'd want to make sure the plan is updated to reflect the most recent census data that we have instead of 12 now 14-year-old data. Another change, of course, is what this year will be what the outcome of our 240B applications are. Those weren't really on our radar screen, and they will have added increased our subsidized housing inventory to 12.8 at least, and maybe 15.8 if both 40Bs are approved. By later this year, we'll know what the results of next month's town meeting vote is on MBTA community zoning, which will be instructive, especially if we look at, especially if I'll keep on going. We'll also know the outcome of by August of the real estate transfer fee and the amendment outside section 107. Those would be important things to take cognizance of. But also what we will know at some point is what the outcome is of the local MCI advisory board's public engagement process on the reuse of MCI Concord, which would then allow us to just parachute into our housing production plan, whatever they come up with. I'm not advocating for a particular outcome there. The select board have come up with a process of how the town will have its vision for MCI Concord. I'm just suggesting that to the extent that one of the visions in that plan is some housing component, we ought to make sure that's listed in the plan, which currently does not mention MCI Concord. Our housing production plan, sadly, the only reference to MCI Concord is in explaining where the persons of color are in our census figures. So the thought was that concurrently with the process that the select board is launching to come up with a plan for the future of MCI Concord, we all of the housing groups, I'm suggesting, let's start a discussion here, but let's put it on the agenda for housing roundtable, which takes place on April 10th, for some discussion about, are we up for making these needed amendments to the housing production plan so that the guidance document the state looks at for compliance is one that actually is as up to date as it can be. And I've asked Ms. Rust for a cost estimate and a proposed timetable. Haven't heard back from those, but I think from her yet on those. But I think those would be important things for us to consider. The cost of updating the whole soup to nuts update of the housing production plan was $30,000. What fraction of that would be needed to merely amend the plan with not as much of a public outreach process, since the public outreach for MCI Concord would be done by another group. We'll see what it is. I'm guessing it might be $10,000 or less. But if there's general support for undertaking that, maybe that's something we could approach the town about to use ARPA funds, or if there's not interest in that, maybe we could even spend our own our own trust funds for it, because there are plenty of affordable housing trusts in Massachusetts that are the funding source for updating housing production plans. Stefan Vader, you have your hand up?
Yeah. I was gonna say, one other significant change is the emergency shelter that Concord is now hosting, and that maybe that changes our demographic somewhat. And I think, as the commissioner said today, that is not going to be resolved overnight, regardless of whatever happens with the funding. It's still going to be an ongoing issue, and settling people in Concord to the extent that we can do that makes a lot of sense. So I'm all in favor of revisiting and updating the housing production plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. Other thoughts about this? It would involve, I wanted to start here, but also bring the discussion to our larger group at the roundtable, because the housing roundtable is charged by the housing production plan as being, the coordinating its implementation. So I think it'd be important to see if there's buy-in from that larger group to undertake this.
Yeah, I generally
other-
think it's a good idea, Keith. I think the only question is when, because it depends on the transfer fee, it depends on the MCI process, but it certainly ought to be done, and maybe it should be done sooner rather than later, with an anticipation that MCI is a potential place for housing, and reflect that in the revision so that we can say, yeah, we are interested in it for housing.
Thanks, Rich. I saw Carrie with your hand up, and then Julie, and then Mike.
I can't find the raise hand feature. I'm not sure where that went. Other than having a more up-to-date document, I'm not sure I understand why this work would be done. And so does it, Keith, from your experience or perspective, does it place us in better position for future state grant funding or something like that?
Well, I guess I think it will save us from embarrassment when the DCAM commissioner and other state officials are looking at an out-of-date housing production plan. And that starts with the census. And in fact, the census work is probably the easiest to do, or at least to, if I don't know if it was Liz Rust that did that work, or if it was the consultant, Jen Goldson, but whoever it is, they could, once commissioned, they could just do that. That might take them several months, and which would probably use up the first part of a time frame, and that by the time we're getting to what's happened with the legislature in August, that we could be using the same people to be updating the plan on that. But I think it's I think it's we should have included the update that we did in 2022 should have included the 2020 census stuff, and we always intended that it would, and we waited until the very last minute to do it, hoping and praying that the federal government would issue those figures, and they didn't do it until 6 months after the select board approved the plan. But nevertheless, the plan's still out of date, and I think to avoid embarrassment, and really, to have for us to look at what, if it were that alone, we should need to do it, but there's so much else that's changed. that I think as we try to convince ourselves and plan for what are we going to do with a real estate transfer, if we suddenly have $2 million a year for housing, with a real estate transfer fee, we really need to make sure that our guidance document is as useful and up to date as it can be. And I think that it really requires us, if we need it for ourselves to be able to do justice to what we're going to ask the voters to do, which is allow us to have $2 million a year.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Keith.
Thanks. Julie and then Mike.
I just wanted to chime in to say, I think it's an excellent idea to update the housing production plan to reflect where we are. It's been a couple of years. And I think of it really as the primary source document of what we look to see if we're meeting our goals. And, you know, we are looking at a much different landscape now than we were when the existing document was published. So updating it makes a lot of sense so that we can all swim in the same direction. And I agree with your comment earlier about potential funding for support on master planning and envisioning repurposing the MCI Concord site. I think that's the right idea. And housing production plan sort of goes along the lines of those same goals. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Mike.
Well, Rich really made my point. It was just, I think it's a great idea to update it. The question is when, and I'm just not sure whether it's the best time right now or to wait until later in the summer and see how some of these events unfold. But I'm not sure I have a hard view on either approach.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I think it would be helpful if Liz Rust could share, you know, when we discuss this topic at the housing roundtable, if we had some idea of what a schedule look like. Would it start in June or July or what? How long would it need to last? And I think it needs to be aligned with whatever the timetable is for the select board's advisory committee, that if they're not going to be producing a vision for or whenever the date is by which they produce their vision for MCI Concord, that's an important date for us to be mindful of when we would need to update the housing plan. Let's not update the housing plan before they've come up with a vision.
Absolutely.
You know, and there are implications of this for CPC, you know, for their fall application when they begin their deliberations as well. You know, in terms of the housing, you know, if there's a housing application, because we may or may not have a transfer fee, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If we and even if the law is enacted, the local option statute is enacted, we still won't know until we bring it to the matter of adoption to a town meeting.
Right.
So, you know, if all else, unless some issue were to come up that required a special town meeting, which the only thing seems to be in another school building. If there's no other reason why we're being convened for a special town meeting, we'd have to wait till next April, a year from now, to even be able to adopt a real estate transfer fee if one is approved this August. Unless there's a judgment made that, gee, maybe that's important enough to call a special town meeting. But those are definitely things, and because if we're counting, because I think we'll have to put in applications for CPC funding, assuming we don't, even if the law is passed, assuming that we don't know until town meeting gives us a thumbs up on it. And you know, I'm sure I'd happily recommend withdrawing our application for CPC funding if we had town meeting approved transfer fee. Rich?
Yeah, but I do think if it passes, and given the history of passage in town, I think we should be planning what to do with that, even though we won't start collecting it until the middle of 2025. In other words, we should be looking at the trust as having $2 to $2.5 million a year, not $500,000 a year.
Well,
Yeah,
that was the
yeah.
original hope when we put the trust together, submitting those 2 home rule petitions, the surcharge and the transfer fee, that it would result in this kind of annual cash flow. So I think was anticipated as we, passed the home rule petitions and created the trust.
So I think we can start, if it passes, I don't think we have to wait until after town meeting to at least program how we think it should be used. If it passes.
Yeah, I agree. And if we're involved in a housing production plan update process, we'll have a structure of getting community input that could help us, maybe put some projects on the radar screen that we're only finding out about now, or that may come forward if there's money to be spent. So, I guess, and I'm just suddenly looking at my watch to see how it's getting late. But is there objection with having this topic be on our roundtable agenda for fuller discussion with the others? Is it okay to go ahead, put that on?
It certainly is going to open up the floodgates, I think, for, every sector wanting an update for their section. Not just, the housing sections.
Well, but it's only a housing plan. It's only,
That's not a long range plan, it's just, yeah.
yeah, it's just our housing production plan that is housing only. If others feel that their plans are so out of date, I guess they can.
Okay, so I thought you also said updating the Envision Concord.
No, I would not.
Okay.
I would not envision that. But I think no,
Another
just
indication that the hour is getting late.
Yeah.
At puns.
So, right, and I have to stay awake for the ZBA meeting that follows. So thank you. Well, we'll put this on the agenda for the housing production plan and have a fuller discussion with our roundtable partners there. We're almost done. I just have a couple of things to mention. And Linda, we will talk about the composition of the trust board as we chatted about earlier. So I want to be sure to do that before we adjourn. The topic that we put on tonight's agenda that I did not get that I did reach out to the Housing Authority and the CHDC about, and perhaps folks from those groups that are here tonight would have feedback, but we're looking at a grantees project status report form to use, since our recent grant recipients are now approaching their 90 days since the grant agreements were signed, and we're trying to come up with a format to get updates. And the suggestion last time was we simply use the form that the CPC does. The advantage to the form is that everyone's familiar with it. And I like being able to go to the CPC's website and see what the status is of all their projects using that form. And that would be neat if we could do that as well. We had also talked about last time of, I think it was Mike's suggestion that we designate in particular members of the trust to be the go-to people for each project that we approve so that, we'd have someone on the small grant program for CHDC, someone else on the Housing Authority's property acquisition program, someone else on the CHDC's buy down program, and so forth. So, so I guess I'd open it up if there's any thoughts about moving ahead with a form, and I did not get any feedback on any changes to the proposed form, and just wonder how folks felt about that.
I think it's fine, and it's also the idea of assigning somebody to a particular project. That's a CPC methodology as well. When applications come in, they get people assigned to each one to do a deep dive for the rest of the committee.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Very good. Then, if the proposed motion I'd suggest is to have the trust vote to amend our funding guidelines by adding a Part 4 grantees project status report. That's the motion. And yeah, I'm sorry, and to assign individual members as is it they call them a liaison, or what would you call? Just to assign projects to individual members.
Just
Yeah, to
to
assign projects, yeah, to individual members.
With that amendment, I so move.
Second,
Motion by Mike, second by Rich. Is there further discussion on that? All right, so on that motion, roll call. Linda,
I,
Mike,
Aye.
Rich,
aye.
Barry,
Aye.
and Keith, aye, so that passes 5-0. The last thing well, before we get to public comment, I did want to raise an issue. Well, it's not on our agenda tonight, and if we need to put it on a future agenda, let's do that. But I wanted to raise the issue that it's that our town bylaw provides that there shall be a board of trustees that shall include no less than 5, no more than 7 trustees. And we're going to lose somebody who's been with us since the beginning, because there is because one of the seats is held by a sitting member of the select board, which I'm sad won't be Linda after the next election. I'm following the ICMA guidelines. I'm not getting involved in local elections, but I'd miss Linda if she couldn't find a way to stay here. And so one thing that we might want to entertain, not only for Linda's sake, but for our own, and for, if we're going to be bigger and better with more money, maybe we might want to approach the select board at some point about increasing our membership from the current 5 up to the maximum 7, which would give us 2 positions to fill that are not sitting select board. Rich Feely, his term is up. He's interested in being reappointed, and I'm happy to bring that recommendation to the select board. And after the election, the select board will choose which select board member they will give to us. But now might be an opportune time to us also to recommend to the select board that they increase the membership of the trust from 5 to 7 members. So I wanted to put out there now. It's not on our agenda, so we probably need to post it and put it on a future agenda. But while it was still fresh in our minds, I just wanted to raise that today and see what initial reaction we have to it.
Keith, I don't have the chart in front of me and forgot it. Did it say our membership is 5 or could go up to 7? What is the?
No, it says it shall include no less than 5 and no more than 7 members. So
So we don't have
by
to go to the select board then. We can just recommend that the select board appoint someone.
yes, we could. Yes, we could.
Yeah, we don't need to have them, we don't need to go back to them with any change in the document. We can just.
Right, we can just bring them,
I think it's important to have more members if
yeah.
if it's likely that we'll get these funds, and if we're going to assign people to projects, you know, we're going to need some bodies here.
Gonna need some help. We're gonna have a lot of projects, gonna need a lot of members.
Right, exactly. So let's get it on the agenda for the next
Okay,
next meeting. But only because it wasn't on. I think it would.
yes, right. If it had been on, we'd be voting it tonight, but it was an oversight on my part not to put appointments on the agenda, and we'll put them on the next one.
And I think we should go for 7, and if Linda's willing to stay, which I hope she is, we could still then try to find a 7th person to be on this,
Right.
be on this committee, so.
Right, yeah. Love to have Linda stay with us
Yes, that'd be great.
to see how this journey ends.
So on a separate note, I know that Rich is eligible for another term and has indicated an interest in that. And as the select board liaison to this committee, in addition to the select board member, being a member of the committee, I'm being asked to move that forward for the next agenda. So I just want to make sure that we all are aware of that and comfortable with that. And Rich, you certainly have made your intentions known, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to do it, but I also understand there needs to be rotation, and sometimes I know can offend people. So, you know, I would accept the judgment, but yes, if asked, I will serve.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. Well, let me say, how outrageous is it? I think the procedures, if we're going on the assumption that we're not actually asking the select board to make a policy decision that they need separately to increase from 5 to 7. Then I think where we may be at is that the existing policy of the select board empowers the chair without a vote to make recommendations to the select board for filling positions. And as the chair, I'd certainly be comfortable and without a vote, just recommending that the select board appoint Linda Escobedo to a 6th position on the trust. And to communicate that with them.
Yeah, my concern I understood that this was going to be discussed at the next meeting, which I appreciate. I just want to be able to move Rich's appointment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So we'll take up we'll take it as it comes, and put the matter forward at a future meeting.
Yeah.
I'll look for a signal from Linda on when the coast is clear to bring it forward.
Yeah, just not tonight. Thank you.
Right. Okay, thanks very much, Linda.
Yes.
I'm going to go to public comment. And then we will adjourn. Any public comment? Thank you all of our folks for being with us. There's Ed. Hello, Ed.
You're
Just a
muted.
note on CPC's status. I think Ann Clifford in the planning office would have not completely up to date, but she's the one that keeps track of where we stand on all the different projects.
Thanks, thanks for that, Ed.
Hmm.
Other public comment? All right, so our next thing is is to schedule a next meeting of the trust. I should mention that the next housing roundtable is on April 10th, Wednesday, April 10th, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow. And so the question would be, do we need, would we want to meet? I'll just put it out there, if we need another meeting, such as to act on the matter that we just discussed, would we want to meet at 6:45 on that night? Well, Mike's not going to be there. So
I don't think we need another meeting before the roundtable.
yeah, okay, so we'll why don't we have a meeting, let's look at the calendar. Sometime prior to the April 29th town meeting, so would, how about Tuesday, April 23rd at 5 o'clock? How does
Yeah, I
that
can
look?
do that.
Mike, can you do that?
Yes, I can do that. At 5 o'clock, hold on.
At 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
Carrie, does that work for you?
No, I'm not sure. I tentatively have a union negotiation session scheduled, but I don't think you should be planning around me for the next few
Okay.
weeks.
Okay. All right, so our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 23rd at 5 p.m. In the meantime, our housing roundtable on Wednesday, April 12th at 7 p.m. And is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
Motion by Mike, second by Rich. On that motion, all those in, let's do roll call. Linda,
I,
Mike,
I,
Rich,
aye.
Gary,
Right.
and Keith, aye. So it's unanimous vote, and we are adjourned at 6:40 p.m.